Good evening. This is Carla from MindPlore with Carla and Friends, and we are here to talk again. Now, I have a sort of repeating panel today, but that's okay. And hopefully our spreadsheet will get more of the old crowd back in who I haven't seen for a long time. Anyway, I have Jeanne, Alford, Locke, or Jeanne, Locke, Alford. She can correct it in a moment. Michelle Peticolas and Kimi Avery. And we are who's drinking her coffee and doing a cheers. And we are going to be talking about going deeper into our emotions, because we know that it's our emotions that really drive how we look at the world and what we see in the world. And with that, Jeannie, I'm going to send it back to you. And thank you.
Okay, thanks, Carla. And good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We're going to be speaking about going deeper in emotions, as Carla said. Last week, we were talking about recognizing emotions and how important they are to how we show up in the world. And that it came across, I believe, that many of us don't recognize what we're feeling because we've been kind of conditioned to feel one way or not to feel, as many of you have pointed out. So we want to go a little deeper. Carla and I were speaking about how certain emotions, say anger, mask other emotions. Like anger, I know, masks hurt. So I tend to come across like I'm angry when I have to realize that I'm really hurt. So I found a couple of quotes I want to share. One is from a writer, Ben Fountain, and it says, any one episode or even moment in a person's life is so complex, with so many layers of past and present, desire and indifference, drift and drive, consciousness and unconsciousness, that language is the best means we found of approaching that kind of complexity. Found that interesting. Language helps us get through those emotions. And then a writer and a coach, Hakuma Karamova, was writing about Plotnick's emotion wheel. Now, my friends Michelle and Kimi are going to know more about this wheel than I do, but it looks pretty interesting. And the quote that she included was, emotions influence our health, performance, well-being, motivation, sense of fulfillment, and decision-making skills. It's important to understand and manage them. So, boy, when I say we're going deeper, and I found those two things, the first thing I thought of was the onion, because I know when I've done some work on emotions that it was told to me it's like peeling an onion. You peel, and then there's another peel, and then there's another peel, because everything kind of rises up. So it's a continual work in progress. And that's really what we are as human beings, continual works in progress. Kimi, I see you smiling, especially when I mentioned Plotnick's emotion wheel.
Yeah, I was given that when I was about 20, and I was meeting with my first therapist, who helped me to understand that I was an adult child of an alcoholic. I read a book about it and I cried my way through it because the book was written about me. And I didn't know the difference between, or I knew the difference between happy and sad, but I had no idea of the range of emotions that were possible. And those distinctions are really powerful. Are you angry, and what's underneath the anger? Is it fear? Or maybe fear is above the anger, and the fear for my survival causes the anger. However you look at it, understanding where you fit in this complex wheel of emotions that is our capacity as humans is really a powerful thing to do. It helps to enrich your life.
according to the wheel, there are like more than 300,000 kinds of emotions. I think I know 4. What's that about? I mean, heavens to Murgatroyd. I know happy and sad, fearful, and elated. So
Joy, joy.
well, I'm trying to get reintroduced to it. So yeah. I should share with the readers that Kimi, Michelle, and I are also part of the same Toastmasters group, and we've been working together. So crosstalk is probably going to happen a little bit more than usual, but these are my touchstones for figuring things out, and I'm really glad that they're here. Michelle, how do you help your clients get through all the emotions? You started out as a grief counselor, and I've experienced recently the many shades of grief. And, when I lost my mother, and I've been talking with several people who've lost someone dear to them. And the only thing I know that I can say is they live on in your heart, and that seems to comfort them. But for going beyond grief, you work with your clients on emotions a lot.
Well, a lot of the people who come to me have been tamped down in terms of their emotions. They've learned how to control their emotions by numbing themselves. And what happens when you have a significant loss is the pattern breaks down. The resistance, the holding back breaks down in many, many cases, not all cases. Some people are so defended that even then they do not experience their grief, but they carry it around. It's a heavy weight. A lot of people are cracked wide open. And so they don't know what to do with those emotions because they have no skills for managing those emotions. So they come to me in order to get guidance on how to deal with the deluge of emotions. And what I do is I teach them how to master their emotions, not to tamp them down, not to eliminate them, but to experience them. And I think I said the last time, if you truly tap into your emotion and allow it to emerge without putting thought into it, but just experience it, it will actually dissipate in 2 minutes or less. I have never seen a client go longer than that. We just sit and I say, yes, go ahead and experience it. And I give them permission. And when they have the permission, it goes away in 2 minutes or less. And they feel the release of that and the energy that comes to them after releasing the emotions, because in holding down the emotions, they're using a huge amount of muscular energy to resist their feelings. Emotions are part of our biology, and the force behind them is huge. The chemistry and the neural networks that impose upon us those emotions, they're there for a reason. They're part of our survival system. And so, for example, grief, part of the reason behind that is that we're supposed to rebond. That when you break that bond with somebody that's close, you need it. Emotions make you miserable so that you do something.
So when you say release emotions, I picture somebody, just exploding and screaming and yelling, because as I said earlier, I probably know about 4 emotions. Is that what you mean? But if you're holding on to something and it's anger, you just kind of scream and you let them scream at you for 2 minutes? Because it felt to me when somebody was screaming that maybe it was only 2 minutes, but it certainly felt like an hour.
Well, chances are they were not following my recipe. They were allowing their mind to jump in and fuel that anger. Oftentimes, when somebody has anger that they need to release, I recommend that they use gibberish. And so they express the emotion, but they don't put the words in it because the words will actually fuel more anger. So they use that, or they can use sound. So I oftentimes allow people to release their emotions through sound, to express what they feel through just humming or gurring. That's one of the ones that is my favorite, is to growl, and to allow that to come out through a growl, so through something very visceral. And that way they avoid having that mind jump in and fuel the emotion. When that happens, then when they actually get permission. Now, my guess is that you probably didn't give that person permission to get angry at you. But if you really were probably not. But if you were to just sit back, create a container for yourself and allow them and not resist them and not defend yourself, the anger would probably go away in 2 minutes or less.
We have a lot to learn, I think, about emotions, and I'm picturing growling like my two puppies. I should do that more. Kimi, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I'm reading a really interesting book right now, and it's called The 9 Nasty Words, the etymology of our cuss words. And one of the things he said in the book that was so interesting, he's a linguist, and when we are talking in a civilized way, we use our left hemisphere. And when cuss words come out, we're using our emotional center. So the more angry you are, the likely words that are going to come out that are damaging. We're not thinking straight. And being able to manage and navigate your emotions. And I love what Michelle said about, sitting there for 2 minutes, just being with the feeling. We're so terrified of those feelings because they can be overwhelming that we bottle them up, and then there's a rage monster that comes out. And
which is why they're overwhelming.
Which is why they're overwhelming. And from my perspective, there's a part of us that has a feeling, a thought about something, wants something for you. For instance, when I was a little girl, my dad was a Vietnam vet, and I was about 3 years old, and I went into the living room. All I remember was all I can think of, actually. I don't completely remember it. My father, I was probably dancing around, being a normal 3-year-old, hyperactive, because I was very hyperactive. And my dad had been told by his therapist to not bottle up his emotions. Well, of course, he'd done a lot, and he had to let his anger out while he beat the crap out of me, like really badly. And all I remember was crying and crying and crying and crying and crying and crying and crying, and finally he promising that he'd never hit me again, because it was brutal. And so just releasing your emotions onto somebody is not actually really helpful. Being able to release it there's a pressure valve. You feel it, you can say, that's really pissing me off. That's a lot easier or a lot better to say now. That's upsetting me, that's angering me, that's frustrating to me. Saying it now instead of bottling it up, and there's that rage monster. And I remember, having grown up with my dad in the rage, I was terrified of my anger. And then what I noticed by the time I was about 14, that I was like a fire-breathing dragon when I got angry. And I was like, oh, I better just pressure gauge, let a little, have conversations, release it, connect, feel, all of that. And
it's interesting that you described that with your dad, because I experienced the same. And by the time I was 14, I told my mother I was his flint, that I could walk in the room and whatever was bottled up in him would explode. So I was the kid that he would explode all over. And it became, actually, there were times that I didn't go home until the very last minute, because that would explain why I'm afraid of my own explosion. So I'm glad that we can have these discussions. But I have to tell you, I now understand my son a little bit, because this boy, he used the left side of his brain to explain to me why the F-bomb was so prevalent in his teenage lexicon, let's say. I really felt like it was every other word, and I tried to tell him not to do it, but he used his left brain, and he said, Mom, it's the most versatile word. And he went on, and my response was, honey, do you think I don't read the internet? So I'd already seen the same meme, but yeah, I like the notion that those kind of words come out of the right brain, because your emotions are more, right brain, that side, your emotions are more set in that more abstract kind of brain, but the left brain is going, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And sometimes I have to say to my left brain in my meditation, okay, you can quiet down now, because that controls so much. And I want to ask, does that, well, I don't think it's an imbalance, but that level of control of the one side of the brain over the other, does that help mask those emotions? And that's why we have them layered so much?
Yeah, I would say that if we're controlling our emotions, we're hiding them, and that would lead to more explosive situations, right? Which is why, again, learning to just feel them, knowing, like Michelle said, they will pass. They absolutely will pass. We can become addicted to emotions. It becomes familiar to us, and we don't know how to handle it any other way. But we can also learn to shift that by learning to navigate our emotions. Well, here's love and here's fear. And I'm choosing love, I'm choosing peace. And I'm feeling something. Okay, breathe into it and just feel it, and then move back to where you want to be, setting your intention for that place.
To do that, do you need to understand the right labels, or can you just feel the emotion and not label it?
At this point, I don't think I need the labels as much. It's more of the physical. What do you think, Michelle?
Well, I recommend that you get the language out of it and go into the sensation. It's when you go into the sensation that you actually release the energy. That whatever chemistry is going on in your body, if you really allow it, then you don't have to have the words. You just need the experience. How are you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling tightness in my chest. I'm feeling this constriction in my neck. I'm feeling, my hands are clenched. I'm feeling hot in my back. That's a really good way to allow the emotions, to notice them and experience them. But I don't recommend that you take it out on people. I tend to be a closet rager. I do it in the privacy of my own room and rage and rant and release that energy, which I think is good, because from childhood, I tended to repress my emotions. And so periodically they do well up. I get frustrated, sometimes over stupid things, and I just release it. And I hope that nobody's around to hear me, because I don't want to expose people to that.
Yeah, I've kind of done that before. It doesn't feel quite as satisfying when you don't have somebody else reacting to you. So I've actually mentioned to folks about writing it down. It's because you can get it out through the pencil. At least I got a little bit of physicality out of it. I think emotions muddle up our logic. And when Carla and I were talking, the idea that we feel angry all the time, and it's because we don't realize that we feel vulnerable, or that we feel fearful, or whatever emotion is there, can screw up a lot of people. And no, I'm angry, but why are you angry?
Right.
Working it through, and that's where you guys come in with what you do with your clients, is pull that out. And I know when I worked with a therapist, she ended up calling me a conundrum. And it was actually a compliment. I finally decided it was a compliment, but because she would try to pull something out of me, and I was so good at hiding it and defending myself that I could flip her around in the discussion. And I remember her saying, "You're such a conundrum. I mean, you're an expert at communications, and so it's really hard for me to dig in, but guess what? I have all the time in the world, and I'm going to dig." And that was like, uh-oh. And then when we really broke it down, she said it was really frustrating, but she got excitement from it when she was working with intelligent people, because they have a way of getting around all of her tricks in the trade. And I was like, so you're telling me I'm smart? And she goes, yes. Okay. Get that out of the way. I said, yes. Okay. And then she goes, but here's the thing. And I remember her clearly going, there are Irish Catholic families around this nation who can sit around the table and have a quiet conversation. And I just looked at her and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And that's how we started peeling away, because the family dynamic that she was getting to me, trying to get me to own, if you will, was that we learned to debate and argue, and it never stopped at debate. It went all the way to the nth degree until my dad would slam his fist on the table. And there's a sound when somebody slams their fist on the table and all the cutlery moves up and down, and that was okay, that's the bell, stop. But she had to dance around. And the reason I'm saying this is because we have a lot of smart people in our viewer group. She had to find very different ways to get through my defense mechanisms, because I was so good at putting them up and changing the subject without even myself not even realizing that I changed the subject. So how's this mean to you? I would turn it around to her and she would go, no, you're deflecting. And so I don't know if deflection could be considered an emotion or if it's just a tool, but that's one of the things that I found when she finally started peeling layers, and it's like, that's anger and that's frustration. And that's, she said, you start to deflect when somebody gets close. And I clearly was not understanding it at first, because this was a concept that was so ingrained, but it was ingrained when I was a child, that I didn't recognize it. And it took a while for us to figure it out. So I love that you give tools to just sit back and let it go and process it. 2 minutes, we can do 2 minutes.
Well, I want to give you a little bit of another perspective on this. Your therapist was trying to give you the language so that you could recognize what was going on. What I do with my clients is I take them inside a journey into their body. A lot of them have never been inside their body. They haven't got that awareness. They're all outward focused. So it's a new experience to even recognize that they're having sensations in their body. But the interesting thing about the way in which emotions reside in your body is emotions are tapped into our memory. Emotions are how we remember things. That when you have a sensorial experience that causes a memory, it's through the emotions that those sensations evoke. And so when you go into your body, into different parts of your body, and you experience the sensation there, it will evoke a memory. And that's how you get access to your emotions, because the emotions are the conduit to your memory. That's the whole development of emotions in organisms, was an upgrade from the flight, freeze, free response of the lizard brain. It was an adaptation that allowed you more discernment. So it's part of survival. But then the whole cerebral cortex, which is the next level of brain development, is a whole different system. It's like 3 different brains operating at the same time. And so when you say, when I'm in my emotions, I get muddled, that's because you're in your emotions and this part of your brain is turned off. Yeah. So that's part of the reason why that happens. And so I try to get people back down into the sensation, because in some ways it's a safe place. They don't have to go into the story. They just go into the experience. And then the memories come up, and that's how I get them into their emotions, is the memory triggers the emotion. There it is.
I keep wanting to, not have to relearn the lesson. So I often say, and you've heard me say this, I don't want to go over that story again. But for Kimi, I'm going to throw it over to you for a second. But first I have to do a grammarian moment from Toastmasters.
Okay.
You just used sensorial. It was a great word. I just wanted to admit to that. I was like, sensorial. I like that word. Okay. Back to regular programming.
Whoa.
So
For those who may not understand consorial, because we get a lot of people who are English English language learners here, I think it needs to be defined, please.
Well, it's sensory centered. So it's having, understanding the sensory aspect of the feeling or of the emotion. So it's about senses, basically. And it's not a word that I've actually heard before, which is why I wanted to highlight it. It's a great word.
Yeah.
It is a great word. And because it's such a great word, for those who may not have a good understanding of English, maybe we should go just a tiny bit deeper into the word so people understand what we are talking about. And don't say, oh, they're using such hard words, I don't understand. So I kind of missed the conversation. I need you guys to get me back there.
But Kimi, why don't you take a swing at that one?
Sure. So I'll pair it with another idea I had wanted to share, which is the feelings and sensations in your body. That's basically the sensorial experience, is noticing and sensing what's physiologically happening in your body. This is a physiological experience where I'm putting my hands together. I can feel the pressure. And that's more of a, the movement of your body, the sensory experience of that, the sensorial experience. And then there's the emotional sensory experience, the sensorial experience of love might fill your heart, or fear might fill your gut, or it might fill your throat. You might feel something. And when I'm working with clients, I do an experience with them called core transformation. And I look at the emotions as symptoms. The emotions are indications that there's a part of you that has something positive it wants for you. And it has one idea of how to get there. I want peace, and this person's being mean to me, so I'm going to rage at them, right? It's got that, so they feel the rage. And it may not look on the surface as though that emotion is positive, that experience is positive. But the way I look at it says, okay, so you're feeling rage. Thank that part of you for being there. That part of you has a positive intention for you. It wants something positive for you. And I have my clients put their hands on their chest or their throat or their head or wherever they're feeling that emotion, as if they were holding the sweetest little baby, like so gently and so lovingly. You just say, breathe into that part of you. And you can think of this part of you as if it is your long lost best friend. It is a committed supporter of you. And you'll feel immediately that part just begins to let go, because it's not seen as your enemy. It's seen as the part of you that wants something positive for you. And then I say, so I've even done this with some pretty dark subjects or dark experiences, but you want to, what does this part of you want? I want that person to be nice to me. Okay, thank that part of you for being there. So this part of you really wants the other person to be nice to you. So imagine that that's happening. And ask this part of you, what do you want through having that other person be nice to you? Well, what I really want is to feel loved. So what this part of you really wants is to feel loved. And it goes, yeah. Ah, and you just breathe into that and then say, imagine what it's like to be loved. The part goes there. And sometimes that's a little tricky, but I am patient when I guide them there. And then I'll say, ask this part of you, what do you want through being loved that's even deeper and more important? And that part will say, oh, I want to be able to express my creativity. Oh, so this part really wants to express your creativity. And then you can feel even just as I'm talking, can't you feel the like lightening of the emotional state? And what you're getting to is the core essence of what that part wants. And I have never had it not go to love with a capital L, like love as connected to all, completeness, wholeness, God. When you get there, and then you bring that down through the other emotional experiences, and I have a list that I take them through, and you get to the bottom into the situations in which you used to feel like you needed to rage at somebody else. And notice how they change. Because when you're bringing this higher core experience into that, all of a sudden that experience is transformed. And then I can say, what new behaviors are available to you now? Oh, I can set my intention to not take that personally because that's their stuff or something like that.
Seems to me that at the end, the bottom of it, there's validation.
Jeanne, I think
it's always. Carla wanted to say something. Yeah.
Thank you. I love how you explained it. And we know there's a lot of people who watch this show whose English is not where our English is. And because of that, we need to remember to keep it simple so they understand. What I love about what you did was you brought it into a very practical way of dealing with it. If someone is watching it and maybe they don't have someone to help them through, are there tips to give them so it can become a practical thing that they can use on their own?
Absolutely. So the first thing is, wherever you're feeling that emotion, you just put your hand there and say, thank you for being there. Because you're remembering, I'm planting a seed. I want you to remember that that part of you is saying, knock, 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 knock. I've got something I want for you. And the more you suppress it, the louder the knocking will get. And the more you just say, pause and go, oh, thank you for being there. The part will begin to lighten up, and then it can let you know what it truly wants. And like I said, the surface layer might look kind of ugly, especially to other parts of you. I want to beat that person up. That might be the surface layer. And the other part of you said, I don't want to get arrested, right? So it might look like that part of you is ruining your life. But if you anytime you look at a part as some part that's trying to ruin your life, then it is going to latch on and get really strong because it's not feeling heard and not feeling valued. So when you instead say, oh, thank you, and this is something anybody can do, and I do it with myself. I'll feel a feeling and I just put my hand there. Oh, thank you. I love you. What do you want from me? And the part says, oh, I just want some peace and quiet, or I want to be happy and this is not making me happy. I want to be loved. And then if I want to be loved, I might walk it up, and then I'm feeling the love of God. And then I look at the situation and it's like, oh, I'm loved, right? So it's very simple. And so when I guide my clients through it, sometimes one time they've got it and they're off to the races and they can use it anytime. And sometimes they need the experience more than that. But it's a training. And once you get a better way of looking at something and truly listening, And this goes with physical symptoms like back pain or heartache, or, the same thing with those too. When your brain has a better way of looking at something, it's going to make the better choice. That's what happens when you get skills from people like Michelle or any therapist person, or even Jeanne, who teaches the PR, and Carla with language. Anytime you get a better skill, your brain starts to use it because it works better.
And that's why on that show, we need to be a little careful. I mean, I can get into the real deep stuff too, but for this show, we need to keep it a little above the ocean floor, just to make it reasonable for those who are listening.
Did that last exercise make it reasonable, do you think?
I think it made it very reasonable.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kimi. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Michelle, you look like you have something to say.
I think it's important to remember that this whole awareness of yourself is influenced by other people, and to recognize that they have a huge influence on your emotional well-being. And so in isolation by yourself, you can talk yourself down and you can help yourself. But to have compassion for yourself, that when you're dealing with other people, that they can trigger you. And you have to have compassion for yourself when you get triggered, that it's just part of being a human being. And oftentimes the people that we attract to ourselves are the very people who are going to trigger us, either because that was our childhood experience and we're used to it, or maybe it's something that we're actually having to work through. That's why it is sometimes a good idea, if you can, to get a coach or somebody to work with you who can hold a space for you in a place of compassion so that you feel safe. Because you're not going to feel safe if somebody is attacking you verbally or with their anger. That's not going to be a good place for you to suddenly say, oh, let me try out this little tool that I was given. You actually need to get out of that situation and go to a safe place in order to do what Kimi is talking about. So that's the only thing I wanted to point out.
Yeah,
Well,
that's so important. Yeah, go on, Jeanne.
One thing I want to add to that is learning there are tools to manage those kinds of situations. I took a class in Tai Chi a while back, and little editorial note, I want to find another class. It was really great. But the opening exercise was going up on your feet, having your hands go up, and that's when you take in the breath, and then your hands go down and you go down flat foot, and that's when you leave your breath. And she had us do that 3 times. What I found in my business life, somebody came at me, and they came at me with both barrels blazing, and it was in front of a group of 30 people, and they just screaming, total inappropriate, but just screaming and saying things like, you're stupid if you believe that, and things like that, which are triggering words for, at least for me. I actually did that breathing exercise, going up on my feet, coming back down. I even did the hands. And while she was yelling at me, I felt like I was that willow moving through until she said something that triggered a more positive response, because I knew if I had answered, if I had tried to stop her, I would have probably gone down the wrong path. And for me, it would have been, I was up on stage, so I thought it would be my job at risk, but I kind of flowed through with it. And so I did that breathing thing. And when she said the right thing that triggered me more positively, I believe I said, so has that been working for you? And she said, no, obviously not. And that gave me the opening. So why are you so resistant to making a change? And I was very calm. And that was one of those gestalt moments when things came together, and I went like, oh, if I don't react and stress, I can actually de-stress the situation. So I felt fairly powerful in that moment, but nobody had told me to use Tai Chi. It just happened. And I think that's because, as Kimi was talking about, I was listening to my body without knowing it, because my throat went, and it was really not a pretty sound. You know, I'm being yelled at. I'm being humiliated. I'm being picked on. And, you know, I want to run away and cry, but you're a professional woman, so you can't do that. So what can you do? And I just took a deep breath. So there are tools to help us unpeel the emotions. They're great meditative tools. And I highly recommend meditation, especially if you drive on Highway 101 in the middle of traffic. Breathing when traffic is crazy helped me avoid accidents, because it's okay not to be speeding as fast as everybody else. It's okay to actually slow down 3 car lengths before somebody else, so that you know you're not going to hit them. You know, so doing the breath work is important, breathing all the way down. And I tell people, breathe to your gut, because that moves your thinking from that mammalian fight or flight that you were talking about, Michelle, to the more logical. You can't be fearful if you're
Actually, I would suggest
logical.
that there's another thing that's going on in the brain, and maybe this is the deep that you're talking about, but I like the biology of it, is that there is a place in the brain. Let me see if I can call this I can't remember the name right now, but there's a place in the brain which is very centered on who you are, ego. There's actually a place where your ego resides. And when you do that spiritual practice, you actually step out of that place into a more global perspective of the world. And so when you do those kind of spiritual practices, you're developing the capacity to shift out of that default mode network is what it's called. You shift out of that into a different place, and to make it possible also to access your left brain and make rational choices. So it's a very good reason for why you want to do those spiritual practices. It literally changes the way in which your mind is wired.
Yeah.
And by spiritual practice, you're talking about connecting with your spirit and being aware that, you know, you've got your mind, your body, your emotions, and your spirit. Because oftentimes people mix up spirit and religion. Religion is more philosophy, but in this case, we're talking about spirit as in that essence that makes us the living being that we are. Is that correct?
If you think of it biologically, it's a different part of your brain, or maybe even not in your brain, but is like your brain is a transceiver and is receiving other kinds of information. But it is a practice that will really quiet down. I mean, they've done, neural scientists have done studies, and when people meditate, that default mode network, which is where the ego they've found is centered, it actually quiets, that the activity there lessens. So whatever that practice is, whether it's deep breathing or it's mindfulness or whatever, but it is that other kind of practice that we usually put into that container called spirit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And something else that I want to just add. You want to finish, Jeannie? You were going to say something.
No, Carla's raising her hand, so finish and then.
Let Kimi finish and I'll.
Okay, so that when you are practicing some sort of spiritual path, whether it's or spirit, whether it's meditation, as Michelle was saying, or some way of quieting your mind, doing that, it's giving you the practice so that if something happens where you're in a conflict with somebody, you have an easier time going back to that quiet place where you can think. I remember I had an incident with my dad. He had very gruffly said, well, you've got to get out of the kitchen because your brother's going to cook Thanksgiving dinner. And I immediately went into the same old fighting experience that I had with him. And because I'd been practicing my meditation, I was able to say, excuse me, and go lock myself in the bathroom for about 10 minutes and reorient myself to what I truly wanted, which was a loving experience with my family for the holiday. And I never had to address my father's outburst, my perceived outburst, Instead, I just chose what I wanted to focus on because I was able to quiet my mind. I walked out of the bathroom in 10 minutes. I had a beautiful holiday with my family. And that night I put my head on my pillow thinking to myself, that was the best holiday that I could have ever imagined. But it was a conscious choice and a practice that I had developed. So you pair those two, and then you have more ability to be able to navigate your experience.
Having said that, I want to add a few points. I know I've been off and on, but there was a problem in my apartment that I needed to take care of. When we're talking to spirituality, one of my favorite quotes from Sri Sri Ravi Shankar is, spirituality and religion are like a banana. The banana peel is what we call religion. And within it is the banana. And the banana is the spirituality. Unfortunately, in life, we have forgotten about the spirituality, and we've been stuck in the religious things we need to do instead of looking within our heart. Along with it, we have one thing that everyone on this planet has in common. We all, the moment we come into this life, we take a breath in. And we do it many, many times through a minute. And for however old we become, we have breathed and breathed and breathed until we come to a point where we no longer are breathing and we have left the planet. Now, knowing that, one thing that we can keep in mind is that our breath, if we take time to breathe and become aware of our breath, our mind automatically settles down. Recently, I was in a room where I started off saying, today hasn't been the greatest of days, but I'm kind of getting through it. And a friend of mine came in and said, well, Carla, do you know how to howl like a dog? And I went, and she had me doing it for a few minutes. At the end of that howling, she said to me, how do you feel now? And we all unmiked because we were in a situation. And everyone all of a sudden went from being, well, down. I'm not saying everyone was down where I was, but everyone was beginning to giggle and laugh. We can use laughter as a way to break that cycle. It's learning to break that cycle of negativity and going to a more positive spot that will keep us from sliding down and down and down instead of moving up and up and up. And I think we all would like to have some type of technique where we do move from that negativity to the positive. After all, in our life, there's always opposites. You can stay in the negative, oh, I cannot do this. And I always yell at people who say I cannot, because that's not true. That's in your mind. Or we can go to the more positive and say, okay, let's take a moment. We're all going to howl, or we're going to make animal sounds, or we're going to laugh, just to change that area where we are. And everyone can do that. We just need to remember. And I'm not saying I always remember, because believe me, I don't. Yes, Jeanne.
I actually add one more tool for that, Carla. And I do this when I'm facilitating group discussions. I have everybody stand up and wiggle and move. I actually play it like it's like we're doing the hokey pokey. So we all, we're all looking a little on the ridiculous side, and you start to laugh because of it. But then I point out to folks when we sit down and we're calming down, I said, do you feel that tingling? Do you feel that tingling sensation? And they sensorial moment, using the word, you feel that tingling. That's life going through you. That's your energy. And we have just shaken up your energy. So whatever was happening before is now different. And now let's take a look at whatever the subject would be. And it's amazing in a group situation what that does in changing the whole group energy, so that we were able to talk about some pretty heavy stuff, but be on the same page, versus having everybody have their own opinion and be arguing. And so I do that in my own practice, but for myself, if I'm starting to feel like I've made 100 phone calls and nobody's home, I shake it up. I go into another room, I get a cup of coffee or glass of water. And when I come back, it's a whole new world. I feel like I've done a whole, reset, kind of like, in a sense, kind of like Groundhog Day, the movie. Every time you know a little bit more, you figure out the movie just a little bit more, but you can do a full reset and then look at the issue at hand differently, whether it's personal feelings or trying to get a problem solved, or, in my case, it was to pull together, people to look at a strategic plan. So these tools can be used every day and every moment. We just simply need to remember. And I think that's the biggest tool, is to remember who we are.
Yeah.
And when we remember who we are, or in alignment with what we need to do, then life becomes a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable. But we get so stuck in what is happening in the world that we forget this.
Yes.
And that's where things go crazy. Yes, Michelle?
So I wanted to make another point about community. And the fact is that we as human beings actually sense the other emotions that other human beings are feeling, and that we experience it face to face, but we actually experience it in a larger way too, because we are actually energetically sending out those emotions. So I bring, what comes to mind for me was when 9/11 happened. You could feel the heaviness. And also through the pandemic, you can feel the heaviness. And sometimes that emotion isn't even yours. You're just a transceiver receiving that. And to recognize that sometimes you're feeling not so good may not be you. You may just be receiving it from the outside. And to have, compassion and to do whatever it is that you can to shift out of that, so that you can help everybody else out there make that shift too.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And making that shift is what this show is about, is helping people learn to make the shift. I do get into a lot of these heavier discussions, but I also, for this show, want to keep it a little to the point. So we are giving good information and we're helping people move. Jeanne and then Kimi,
Yeah.
or the other way. I don't.
Kimi, go first, and then I want to.
Sure. Wind up. Yeah. I just wanted to highlight, Carla, what you were saying about the laughter. And this goes to what each of us have been saying about feeling in our body. And you cannot think a positive and a negative thought at the same time. When you change your physiology, especially through laughter, you get the oxygen in your system, you're using more sensorial experience, and it changes your perspective. It's a very powerful tool. And Carla, I know you do groups. I'm a certified laughter club leader also. Excuse me. And it's a beautiful thing because it does help change physiology.
And actually, the laughter that I teach is not the same as laughter yoga. It's actually a very unique form. But the important thing that we often forget, we don't need the drugs. We have those drugs right within us. And we all have a fountain of joy right within us. And we don't go inside to move outside and bring that to the world. Okay,
well,
Jeanne, I'm sorry.
And laughter is a choice. You don't have to have something funny to make you laugh. You can start laughing. It's contagious. It feels good. And I'm all for it.
Right. And that's the importance of a laugh. That's the importance for knowing how powerful we really are. We are much more powerful than we give ourselves credit for. And we look outside, you look for Michelle and Kimi to go and talk to. Well, yeah, that's a good thing. But the more powerful you feel within yourself, the more powerful you're going to be able to move forward. Jeanne, we do need to close soon.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of pull some things together. As Michelle said, we're all connected. And as you and Kimi were talking about, we can change our physiology and change how we react in the world. The thing is that we can change the world, each one of us, but we don't want to think about that because it's overwhelming. But here's the thing. All I can change is how I react or act in the world. And I can choose to make the chaotic choice, or I can choose to make the peaceful choice. And when I choose the peaceful choice, the happy choice, and I make a change in my world, those ripple effects change in other people that I'm not even aware of. And I'll tell you, it's like me just smiling at Kimi while we're walking down the street. We don't recognize each other, but we smile. That changes our world. And those ripple effects will change the political ramifications that we see every day. And that's how people connect, not political, the stuff we hear in the news, but how people act and react within each other. And we can actually start that ripple effect by ourselves every day. And I think of the harmonic convention that was done in the late 80s, where there was a moment where everybody that was aware of it did some meditation. And there were some big geopolitical changes that happened not too long after that. I mean, and there may not be a scientific way to tie them, but those of us that work on the spiritual side, the inside the banana part that you were talking about, Carla, we know that it made that difference. We know that getting the world together for just that one moment in time shifted how we are in our planetary side. That's how big it can be. And I try to remind people that we get to change our own immediate world. And that's the power we have, changing our own immediate world. How everybody else reacts to how we change, that's up to them. But we get to start the ripple effect. And, as the old Breck commercial, I told two friends and they told two friends and so on and so on, it becomes an exponential change. So I like to remind people of this when I'm talking to them one-on-one, because taking that one deep breath that we've all talked about, taking that moment to validate the feelings we have deeply, we'll find those layers that we have and we'll heal them. But we can heal a lot more just by taking care of ourselves. And that's what I hear.
And actually, that is what the show is mainly about, for people to begin to open up their awareness to how we can heal from within the whole planet. And with that, we have come to an hour. And I would love to have Michelle and Kimi talk, but we'll be here much longer. So I am going to end the show. We will be back definitely with Jeff Pulver on Thursday. Jeanne and I will be back. And I think Neville Gaunt, there's a little discussion going on right now. Cameron cannot be there. And have a good day. Use your breath. Use what you have within you, because you really don't need to look outside to handle your emotions. Your emotions are within your heart. Become aware of it. Look for those happy emotions and use them to move forward. It's not always easy, but it can be done. And with that, ladies, can we wave goodbye? Bye, everyone.